Thank you and welcome. Great to see a room full of folks tonight. Thank you very much for being here. And a special welcome to Chester County Board of Commissioner Chairman Josh Maxwell. Thanks very much, Commissioner, for joining us tonight and sharing some of the county priorities and issues going on. Would like to report we had an executive session this evening at 6:30 regarding a legal matter. And is there a motion from any council person to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joel. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes. We have an agenda and we are missing one council person for the record. Rachel? Kathleen sends her apologies. She had a family issue come up this afternoon that she couldn't be here. So let's get into the consent agenda items that were discussed and approved the consent agenda on Monday. Is there a motion to accept the consent items? I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. There is one other additional piece of business related to the approving of an auction results for police vehicles that we took off the consent agenda just so we can get the two values of the vehicles, which Chief Holdsworth was able to do. The value you'll see was $3,200 for the Explorer and $9,155 for the 2017 Charger. Any additional information, Chief?
No, sir. The bid reports are attached to that. So we just ask that you would approve that at this evening's meeting.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the auction results?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any public discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. It's unanimous. And we will certainly have a public comment after the meeting, towards the end of the meeting. And we'll certainly allow public comment and questions throughout the meeting as we get into our workshop portion as well. So with that, what we're trying to do this evening is to get a couple of things accomplished. One is to understand from Commissioner Maxwell what the county's priorities are, what the key points they're trying to drive through, and how that relates to the borough's priorities and how we can work together towards similar ends. Also, we're going to ask Kyle, our manager, to share the results of an exercise that he, along with the consultant, brought the council of the town through. A number of you were involved in public sessions, sort of a Q&A session, expressing your opinions about what the priorities for the borough should be. The same thing was done with nonprofits and businesses in the borough. And then that was also done with the council and staff a couple of weeks back as well. So we'll hear the results of that, the process, as well as the results of that this evening as well. And again, how that ties back into the county's priorities. And then third, we'll talk about ADUs, a topic that came up at our March meeting, and I'm sure some of you here this evening for that specifically, but we'll get into that in a little while into the meeting. So with that, could I ask Chair of the Commissioners, Josh Maxwell, to come up and share with us what's going on at a county level. Josh is the current chair. It's his second term in office and was also a fellow mayor, I believe. Mr. Mayor, is that right? In Downingtown. Welcome.
Rachel, are we good? All right. So guys, hey, thanks for having me. We haven't met before. My name is Josh. Chair of the Board of Commissioners in Chester County. I'm from Downingtown, so unfortunately, I don't live in Kennett Square, but I love savory pies. I love gouda ice cream on Main Street, and I love $20 million libraries. You guys do everything big for our halls, libraries. So it's cool to be here and just share some of the things we're working on because I work for you. So it's wonderful to have the opportunity to talk about the things we're doing at the county alongside this fantastic borough council to help you guys out. So this slide, I'm going to stand back here so I can see the same thing. This is a list of grants the Kennett Square Borough has gotten over the last few years. There are three types of grants you see on the screen. One says ARPA. That means American Rescue Plan dollars. That's $100 million the county got from the federal government during COVID. We decided to give out almost all of that out to municipalities throughout Chester County who are supporting county priorities. So you see a couple right off the top that we gave to Kennett Square Borough. There are 73 municipalities in Chester County. At least 2 awards to Kennett Square Borough, library, pump station improvement. See Vision Partnership, that is money that goes towards municipal planning. Kennett Borough has applied for a few of those over the years, and that's for like comprehensive plans, things like that. It's a match from the county. The borough will kick in some more. Preservation Partnership Program, that's for improving open space. CRP, that's community revitalization programs, that's specific to boroughs. Looking at this list, it looks like the management here always applies for grants, or at least consistently applies for grants, and also does the grant applications well enough to get those awards. That is bonded from the county. And that's specific to Chester County. We're the only ones that give out CRP grants, and only boroughs in the city of Coatesville can apply for it. We do a lot in land preservation and farm preservation in Chester County, but this is our kind of carve out for boroughs to make sure we have downtowns. And often it's for things like sewer, stormwater. You see Vision Partnership again with the zoning regulatory updates, and then back to CRP for the parking garage expansion. And again, those are specific kind of general fund county dollars from county taxpayers going to boroughs like Kennett Square. My friend Rachel. All right. Here's a few more over the last few years. CRP, again, these are streetscapes, downtown stuff. CDBG, that's a new one on the list. Those are federal dollars that flow through the county, and we are in charge of dispersing them throughout. They are usually for populations experiencing poverty. So they go to things like LCH or the garage or organizations like that, libraries and things like that. So you'll see CDBG, Community Development Block Grants on here, and that's our allotment from the federal government that we kind of carve out to populations like that throughout the county. You see CRP a few more times, and then at the bottom, a Community Development Block Grant. Those must have been tiered towards organizations or populations experiencing poverty. Make sense? A lot of money coming to you guys. I was mayor of Downingtown for 10 years. We never applied for one CRP grant. Kennett Square, Westchester, a few of the other boroughs really get after these grants, and it is unusual to see that many lines coming in municipalities. So you guys are really getting after it, and that's cool to see. And you guys know that. Look at this borough hall, look at the library. We know. So affordable housing, one of the biggest things that we're working on countywide right now with our nonprofit partners is how we get more people into accessible and affordable housing. Accessible housing means, hey, you're working full time, but you can't afford a house nearby. Maybe you just got out of college, you have student loans, making $50,000, $60,000 a year at Vanguard. Why can't you live within 100 miles of Vanguard? Next is affordable housing, and that is subsidized housing. Single mother, 3 kids, unable to work a job and a half that you need to live in Chester County, or a senior living on fixed income. How do we support those populations? So 2 different things: attainable housing, so I'm working full time, can afford something, and that's usually dealt with through zoning, and affordable housing means we're subsidizing it. Rachel? So the county is approaching this from a couple of different ways. First, globally or countywide, we're looking at housing choices. We want attractable, affordable, aging-friendly, adaptable, and accessible. We call those A+ homes. So those are the categories we're trying to hit throughout the county. Not all in one space, but we need a little bit everywhere. We're very spread out. We can't have all of our affordable housing in one zip code. That's not good for school districts. We need a little bit everywhere to share that burden. We're working with municipalities to think creatively. I know Westchester has looked at the ADU friendly ordinance that your council's talking about today. The county generally is supportive of finding more housing in downtown areas. Obviously a local call, but just mention that globally it's things that have worked in some other places. We support the House America initiative. This is where we made a commitment to develop 1,000 new affordable homes over a 10-year period. That means if you'll be able to afford to live in that unit with 30% of your gross income. We have some projects we've worked on. Again, we do over 100 units a year in affordable housing projects typically. Willows Valley Run is the most recent. That's 120. That's in Thorndale. We work with Habitat Humanity, one of our main players in this space, at the Cambria Terrace in Coatesville, homes in West Grove. We acquired 37 acres in Cowan and Thorndale for future development. Hankin Manor in Phoenixville, that's 50 units specifically for seniors, right across the street from the food pantry. Awesome connectivity to downtown. You can walk to the hospital from there or the high school. We also have Pinckney Commons in Westchester. That is single mothers, people getting out of transitional housing who are in a good position to get a voucher or things like that. Most of those folks are working and or have children. Red Clay Manor right here in Kennett Square. Villas in West Bradford was additional 35 units. So we're trying to get to 1,000 units over 10 years, and we're tracking above that already. And I think the next slide explains why we're kind of investing in this. So we're tiering our grant programs. We talked about CRP earlier, and we talked about community development block grants earlier. Again, 10 Square's gotten a lot of those. We're tilting them towards affordable and attainable housing projects. We need more housing in downtowns for seniors, for single parents, things like that. So those projects are getting a larger percentage of those grant buckets than previously. We're making the largest investment we have on an annual basis into housing projects that support those populations. Again, community development block grant has to be for specific populations. CRP, that's our discretionary funds where we can invest in housing in places where we have municipal partners who want to work on these projects. Last fall, this is state money, whole home repair program. How a county works in Pennsylvania, we're a Commonwealth. Most of our funds come to the federal or state, and then we decide locally how that goes out. Your borough council members, your mayor might call and say, hey, we got this great project. Let's find some federal, state dollars or county dollars to support them. In this case, we are awarded 3.1 in whole home repair programs. Habitat for Humanity, Good Works, and Good Neighbors sent a joint application and kind of carved up the county into 3/3 to invest that money in improving homes where people can live. That could mean putting handicap ramp for someone who's a senior who's now going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of their lives. It can mean a number of things, a new boiler, a new roof, things like that. It's designed to support 120 households. They have 371 applications so far. So obviously more demand than the money we need, and we're going to work with our state legislators to advocate for more funding coming into that bucket. Because in Chester County, we have a lot of capacity with nonprofit partners. I didn't mention the Housing Partnership for Chester County, which is a neighbor of mine in Downingtown. They do amazing programming on helping people get into homes, fix up those homes. And then we have some really great development partners in Good Works, Good Neighbors, Habitat for Humanity, where they have high capacity. They can do 371 homes. We just need to find the money to do them. So we're going to advocate for more money into the whole home repair program moving forward. Now that we've established proofs of concept that we can actually spend the money, and our nonprofit partners are spending it in an effective and efficient way. Rachel? Behavioral mental health. This is another something coming out of the pandemic that we've invested heavily in. We lost 60 behavioral health beds when Tower Health shut down Brandywine Hospital and Jennersville Hospital. Those behavioral health beds were in Coatesville. So we reached out to Penn Medicine, Mainline Health, and Christiana Care to kind of establish a working group to reopen the hospitals, but also how we can replace those behavioral health beds. And what they told us is we're going to spread out those behavioral health beds between our health systems. So not one person is sharing those burdens. A lot of those behavioral health hospitals that were specific to that issue were closing. So Penn Medicine, Mainline Health, and Christiana Care started to figure out how they can hold 10 here, 35 in Paoli. Penn Medicine could take more when they open up in Coatesville eventually. We found a nonprofit that Penn Medicine recommended to us called Haven Behavioral Health. The Penn Medicine is the landlord and Haven is the nonprofit partner. We found $2.5 million in grant money for them. They opened up a behavioral health hospital, I think in January in Chester County Hospital's campus, capacity for 72 beds. Right now they're treating 6 people as they go through the accreditation process. Once they're accredited, we'll make an announcement and we'll start spilling those beds with people who are experiencing behavioral health issues, and that could happen within the next 30 days. We're still working diligently on trying to find behavioral health support for children, for youth. We don't have that filled yet in Southeast PA to the capacity we absolutely need. We have some ideas in Coatesville with the Penn Medicine facility going on there and some ask for money that we might be able to finagle something there. But letting you know that that is still on the to-do list is behavioral health support for children. Huge priority for the county right now. We're looking for the partner that we can fund to make that happen. Crisis intervention team, your police chief is certainly aware of this. This is training for police officers, sheriffs, people in the prison to respond to crisis. Too often they're dealing with someone with a behavioral health issue and they're a police officer and they're not trained to do that. So the county provides training to those folks. We've also established a 24/7 mobile mental health crisis unit this year with $10 million of our ARPA funds. So now 24/7, if someone is experiencing a behavioral health issue in downtown Kennett Square, that police officer calls the county and social workers show up, whether it's 3 p.m. or 3 in the morning, and they end up at this behavioral health hospital instead of Chester County Prison. And we expect we'll get better results and better outcomes for people experiencing mental health issues in Chester County. And that was specific advice from our hospitals. Like, what can the county do? You're the ambulance that gets people to our hospital. make sure you're doing that, and we can alleviate the stress on police departments and police officers who are being asked to do something that is beyond what we feel they should be doing. The last one is the COPE program. This is something specific to Chester County mostly. If someone experiencing a drug overdose and ends up in the hospital, it's 3 in the morning, somebody who's in recovery, who is stable, shows up to help them. So they don't know what to do. They're scared. Maybe they don't want to talk to their family. Someone who has been in that hospital bed before, who is coming out of, who's dealing with that addiction successfully, is hired by the county to go support them and immediately be a hand holder as we get that person into recovery, get them the medication support they need. And that's the COPE program. We do a lot of investment into that. We raise a lot of money from folks throughout the county on this. Human Needs Network is the 360-degree organization we set up between our law enforcement, schools, hospitals, libraries, nonprofits, United Way and county departments to support this new system that we're setting up, the mobile mental health crisis unit, all the behavioral health and mental health issues we're doing. We set up a new call center for people experiencing homelessness. Before, the calls were routed through Pittsburgh. Now they're routed through Westchester, Pennsylvania. So we were having an issue a couple years ago, and when this got started, if you're in Phoenixville and homeless, or Kennett Square and you were homeless, they said, just walk to Safe Harbor in Westchester. Well, that's not going to work. That's too far away. So now it's a local resident who answers the phone who knows how far Kennett Square is from Westchester, and we can send a bus, or we can send an Uber, and we can get that person to the shelter where they need to be. Specifically, if they have children or something else that's going on, domestic violence. These calls come in all the time, and we're going to be in a better position to support them moving forward, hiring local people to support them. Economic development. All right. A couple of things here. I talked about hospitals. The county worked with Christiana Care with a lot of feedback to the community on different hospital providers. We wanted that area. Christiana Care already had a footprint there and got some positive reviews from the people we talked to. They'll be open in about a year. There's now fencing going up as they start construction on that facility. That'll be called Christiana Care West Grove. I would encourage having them come in and talk to you and get some feedback if they do these types of things that I'm doing all the time. I know Doug and the team over there would be happy to talk to you to explain what's going on. Not Doug Deffler, Doug from Christiana Care. Workforce development. This is just one example. Project Reconnect is a program where we pay for, I think it's state funding, we pay for women with kids to go back to college. If they dropped out of college at some point and because of a childcare issue or because they couldn't afford college, we'll pay for them to go back and we'll pay for the childcare. We've had 100 folks go through this already, where their college tuition was paid, the childcare was paid, transportation was paid for it, and we have 100 folks who got their college degrees or are on track to get their college degrees over the next 2 years. You have to have been enrolled in a 4-year university. You had to have dropped out in good standing. And this state program that we're in charge of implementing, we've got 100 folks. I think 10 have already gotten their degrees, and we have 90 more on track to get their diplomas. And that's we think that's very important. My mother happened to raise 4 kids by herself. She works 3rd shift at the hospital, and got the associate's degree, and allowing people to go back to work really helps them economically. Economic development, Ag Connect, we're increasing our investment into preserving agriculture in Chester County. We spend, I think, about $3.3 million a year in preserving farms in Chester County. We're that line between development and farms. We spend more money than any county in Pennsylvania in preserving farms. We have to do it, or they're going to disappear forever. We've done a couple things this year, and we're calling it Ag Connect. We have 4 teams of volunteers, includes farmers. One of those teams is going to be specifically on finance. So if you're interested in getting into farming, and that's an important population we want to hit, we'll connect you with a bank that loans to farmers. So we got some people who want to take over a farm or want to invest by a farm, but their bank doesn't know how to loan to farmers. So one of those teams is specifically going to help farmers with financing. Another one is specific to marketing. So we're going to start marketing farms in Chester County, whether it's agritourism or different things, making sure that we're promoting farms in Chester County, so you know where your local farm stand is. We're going to get the freshest eggs, the freshest milk, the freshest meat, whatever you want. How close to your house is it, to an interactive map? What a great Saturday morning thing to do with our kids. So we're hiring one person. The job's posted right now to just do marketing for farms and farm stands, get people in Chester County, spending money in Chester County. I get those people on the main line, Philadelphia, when they want to take a day off on a Saturday, spending money in our farms, whether it's agritourism or supporting farmers market. Infrastructure, Chesco Connect, that's our new bus system. You see those things flying around. I think we have 80 buses when we started that about 2 years ago. 92% on-time rate for municipal bus system. The previous system we had was a private bus system. It was around 75% on-time rate. And a lot of these folks were trying to get to dialysis, to the senior center, to all those things. So we're 92% that. And that's the capacity where we can start scaling that, where if we have an issue or we have a fire and people need to get to work like we had in Oxford, we now have the bus system to support people and have a mobile transit unit, kind of like a mini municipal bus network that we can use for big events, small events, for specific issues that come up throughout the county. So look at that Chesco Connect bus. They're starting to roll out, pun intended. We now include that CRP that I talked about on that first slide is specific to boroughs. We include bonus points for applications that invest in affordable housing infrastructure, green improvements, and activities that add something entirely new to the urban center. So you see some of that investment in participation with the new library, different things that Kennett Square is doing. Other places you get extra points on the applications into that program when you hit one of those 3 goals here in Chester County. I think that's it. Did I bore you guys? I tried to roll. It was 14 slides. I wasn't sure if that was too many. I don't know you guys that well. But if you guys have any questions, I can also stay and answer them later. I don't know if the council wants me to answer questions now.
Please, if you're willing to, please.
Absolutely.
Seems like the county always wants everybody to do what they want to do. Landscapes was good for this whole county, but it wasn't good for Kennett Square, Westbrook, or Oxford, because we're pretty well built out. Affordable housing is the same problem. Everything else you say is great. I don't know where you're gonna do it, unless you're gonna double up. Our roads aren't made for housing. Our roads are bogged down. Our ground is almost all built up. So all I keep hearing about is affordable housing. Well, if you build $160,000 home, 6 months, it's gonna be worth $250,000.
Yeah,
It's not gonna be affordable.
I hear. I think what you're saying is what a lot of people feel, and I'm in a town the size of Kennett Square, Downtown Borough, and a lot of people feel the same way for you. How do we support this infrastructure? Our tax base is only so big. Our affordable housing projects are guaranteed to be affordable for 40 years. So I mentioned that project in Phoenixville. I imagine Red Clay is similar. So it had, okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
But he did a great spot.
Hmm.
And he does a nice job. I don't know if there's any spot.
Well, we'll look at anywhere. I mean, Oxford, West Grove, Phoenixville, anywhere where folks are interested in our money going to support housing in their downtown, we're going to look at it. And it's up to you guys to be interested, fill out the application or not. But the money's there in case you guys want it. You have another, sir? I didn't talk about, yes, I didn't talk about broadband. I feel like that's what you're going to talk about. Because we did find how much for broadband in the Southern Chester County connectivity? Some, was it 200,000? It was $200,000 for connectivity.
Everything we talked about on behavioral and mental health side, there's an explosion of telemedicine throughout the country. And so we're partnering with LCA to provide a health portal and a lot of the work that they're doing in the Hispanic community here in Kennett Square. But we'd like to partner with Christian and others to basically proliferate the use of health systems all throughout Chester County. Well, because for some low-income people, they have no transportation, they need immediate help, and it's a way for them to get that services. And the same thing for agriculture. I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase precision agriculture. Basically, we can increase the yield and reduce the cost and make agriculture more profitable for the farmers in our area and that's another area to work on. That's true of the area. I'm sure you're familiar with all the attention. Thanks again for this.
Sure, Jim. And I would just email me and I'll connect you to Doug at Christiana Care. just come over to a retirement home down the street to talk about when they're opening and get some feedback. And I'm sure they'd be interested in make sure they're coming in the community the right way, and I'd be happy to connect you guys to them. Ma'am?
Josh, can you share your mic with the person asking the question so the people online can hear?
That's an excellent idea. I'm going to take advantage of that. Can you take my mic from me? There we go.
I have two questions. We are concentrating on boroughs, but what about the surrounding townships that have a lot of property that is open? Well, that was one question. And the other question is, does the county support LCH? Because I know they are overwhelmed. I know people that work there and they are very much overworked.
So generally how the county provides grants to townships, and though not completely, is in the preservation space. So we spend, that's $3.5 million of farms every year. That's in places like Upper Oxford and East Marlboro and things like that. In addition to the land preservation, Crabway Farms out in Westchester, that's a $26 million preservation project. A lot for any county, specifically us, and we've done projects in this area to a similar scale, but much smaller. So it's typically in preservation in the rural areas, natural lands, French and Pickering, and things like that. But we do invest in affordable housing projects in places where they want it. I mentioned a couple of townships on that slide, including Count Township, where they're not eligible for CRP funds, but they are eligible for CDBG funds sometimes, and we're always finding money for affordable housing projects, and we will be for the next 8 years at least. So if it's something like that, we're going to support it. LCH is one of the best, highest capacity nonprofits in the county, if not Southeast PA. I used to teach citizenship tests there when I was in college. I used to teach GED classes there when I was in college for 2.5 years. And the team over there, we met with just a month ago to talk about their needs moving forward. We found a lot of money for them during COVID. They were great at providing testing to populations that didn't want to come to the government for it. And in the back of my mind, and I haven't met with Ronan and the team over there yet, there's a lot of agricultural workers here who are working full time who need attainable housing. They don't need to be subsidized. They need housing nearby that they can match their salary to and live in good conditions. And LCH, in my view, and I haven't talked to Ronan about it, would be one of those wonderful providers where we can fund and do a project for populations like that, where they're working full time. We don't have to subsidize the rent. We just need to make sure they have the apartment, the condo, the townhouse, the house that they can afford with the paycheck they're living off of. So we were very close with LCH. You're welcome. Moving on. Back to Mr. President Norris. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for your time and sharing the county priorities. Commissioner, could we ask you to stay up here just for 1 second? We wouldn't be hospitable as one of the finest boroughs, towns in the state if we didn't at least give you a little something in return. Mr. Mayor?
We definitely want to take this opportunity to thank you in public and the other commissioners for the time and the energy that you've invested in Kennett Square. For those of you that don't get a chance to see the commissioners, as the chairman mentioned, there are 73 municipalities in Chester County. There are a lot of opportunities and places for them to invest their times, but I can tell you that every time we call and ask, they're here, not only for funding, but to support different organizations. We were at the library together last week for an event, and coming right out of the pandemic, every phone call we made, every request that we made, every service that we needed, they were there, they answer their phones, and have been incredibly helpful. So we could not have done a lot of the infrastructure work that we've done over the last 5 years and then coming up without the financial support of the county. So tonight we're going to present you with a proclamation honoring the Chester County Board of Commissioners and their support of the Borough of Kennett Square, Chester County, Pennsylvania. I won't read the whole thing because a lot of it was on your slides, but I'll hit the highlights for you. The Borough of Kennett Square is located in the County of Chester in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, whereas Chester County is a priority partner for the Borough of Kennett Square, and the borough shares its genuine appreciation for the commissioner's dedication to funding grant awards awarded to our municipality. Whereas the Chester County Commissioners have supported grant funding to the Borough of Kennett Square in the total amount of $1.79 million in 2021 and $500,000 and for the full renovation effort of Birch Street, addressing stormwater, pedestrian access, and road conditions. The Borough of Kennett Square received a $350,000 grant for the upgrades to Willow Street, including improved pedestrian access, repaired road conditions, installation of safety barriers. Whereas the Borough of Kennett Square received a $400,000 grant to replace the aging sewer pipes at Terminal Way. The Borough of Kennett Square received a $500,000 grant to rebuild the water pump station, allowing for improved water quality and disaster resiliency. The Borough of Kennett Square received a $40,000 multi-municipal grant for the planning Kennett Connections. And the Borough of Kennett Square wishes to continue to work collaboratively with the County of Chester on our mutually shared goals. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Matthew Fedek, the Mayor of the Borough of Kennett Square, share sincere gratitude for the grant funding provided for the various borough projects in the ultimate goal of providing a better quality of life for our residents. So, thanks for doing it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask our manager, Kyle Coleman, to share with us the process and the priorities that have come out of the process regarding the borough?
Sure. Thank you, Bob. It was a great presentation. We appreciate you coming out, and the county makes it really easy to work collaboratively. They've got a great staff, so that's borne out through there. As it were, this is the time of the year that we go through our strategic planning process, and just for what it's worth, I understand everyone was here for the first and the third presentation, so we'll try to keep this moving. The process that the borough takes every year is purposeful and it's repeated. So bear with me if you've heard it before, but every spring now for the third straight year, we gather residents and leaders of local organizations and our borough council and mayor, and we go through and think at a really high level, what kind of a borough do we want to be? What are our priorities at the 10,000 foot level? Then later in the summer, we'll go through and say, okay, based on that, what are the big rocks that we have to have in order to do that? So going back a couple of years, it was infrastructure. Spoiler, it's still infrastructure. But some of those big rocks are investing in our worst road, which was Birch Street. The county is helping us do that. Investing in our sewer plant and sewer pipes, right? So all of that then feeds into the budget at the end of the year that really takes those big rocks and fills in all the little stones around it. So we could just hop into the next slide here. So there's really 3 reasons to do this every year and to have this purposeful planning process that will feel repetitive for some. First, it's a delegation of duties. So staff is essentially, if you remember the old school navigation systems, right? You'd put it on your dash. It's just like Google Maps. Council says where the destination is to be, council and the mayor. We say, here are 3 routes to get there. This one's the fastest, but you'll have tolls. This one's the second fastest without tolls. And we start down that path, and our job is to get there by avoiding as many potholes as possible. At any given time, the elected body has the right to change course, just understanding that there are extra costs, right? You will have wasted a little gas going down the road. And really tonight's discussion on ADUs is that in practice. So first is clarifying what those roles are as staff that executes and council that comes up with the policy. It's about transparency. So we engage the public on the front end, get feedback, and we engage you in the middle part when we vote for this plan, and then we engage you at the back end when you see the projects. And then lastly, efficiency, right? If we have a limited staff, we try to keep that staff as small as we can. It really helps, and we appreciate council and the mayor giving us direction so that we spend as little time on extraneous projects as we can. Good. So this is largely what I mentioned, but our process each year is first a public process, and this went out to 10,000 people through our subscription e-newsletter. It was given out in a mailer to every address in the borough, giving everyone a heads up that this was coming in the spring. So bringing the public, we had, I don't know, 30, 40 people come in. Every manner of interest and priority. We take that, we filter it a little bit by talking to leaders of local organizations, right? Leaders of the library and local businesses and the YMCA and the borough and CACs and every organization, because the leaders of those groups have a different perspective. And then we bring in staff and our elected officials. We have a great staff. They're on the ground. They understand really what's going on. And our elected officials have the pulse of the community. So out of that comes tonight's session, which is an introduction. It's an appetizer. It's a teaser for the larger real plan that we will then vote on in June. It's called a roadmap because it's probably a dozen pages that really lays out from a independent consultant's perspective, what did the public tell us? What do we actually prioritize? And then the last piece is actually executing the plan. So building out your capital plan, going and getting grants, right? Hiring the right staff to do it. All those things fill into that. The outcomes from this year's discussions. So again, all three sessions were moderated by an expert facilitator whose job is to literally go around the country, talk to smaller municipalities, bigger municipalities, and help us to actually understand what it is that we're saying, right? Okay, we think this is a priority. What does that actually mean? And the three takeaways for this year are infrastructure above and below ground. It's tough to invest in infrastructure that you can't see, but our council has done a really good job of supporting that. Our staff does a good job of it, continuing to do that. Economic development, right? We know that some of the biggest buildings in our borough on our main street are largely vacant. So we need to fill those to reinvigorate our downtown. And then lastly, fire and EMS. So we have great public safety in the borough. And, what we need to do is we need to really make sure that we figure out how we're going to fund things and stabilize those operations for the long-term future, because we really are fortunate to have such a well-serviced area. So the next steps, just wrapping up here, is council consideration at the June meetings. Obviously, as the policymakers, you can change any of these three. You can pivot them. That's fully within council's purview. And for us to go out and execute it as a staff. So tried to keep it brief there. Are there any questions or comments? Happy to take any. Sure.
We have an opportunity. We have a sewer plant and nobody else can. Nobody else will ever get it to do. And it down to why would you, that's your only place, that's your only hammer. You only have one hammer in your life. Why don't you say, hey, you want 400,000 gallons of sewer? Okay, you gotta pay for it, but you also gotta have to pay for our pipe fee, because that sewer comes from Kennetown through our borough into. Why should we pay for sewer we already have in the pipe? Okay, how old they are, they are putting up the whole what we have. If they're going to increase, you say, hey, you gotta contribute towards increase the size of our pipe. There's only two answers, well, yes and no. You don't ask, they're not gonna volunteer. You gotta say, you want sewer? I want our sewer plant and our ball field in Kennetown, Kennett Square. In Kennett Square. So you don't have to go to Kennett Township every time you want to do something, either the sewer plant or the ball field. We're paying for it anyway.
Yeah, so I think everyone up here acknowledges that the sewer plant is an asset of the borough. It's one of a few that we have. We've been in discussions with them for a couple of years now. I'm not going to get into what those are because those are private negotiations, but I can tell you, about a month ago, the borough got just under $1 million in federal money for the sewer plant upgrade. And we got, and Rob can say the exact number, but several $100,000 from a private developer when they needed a pipe to be expanded. So that's a, right, but
For anything but the sewer plant. So if you're making $8 million a year, you either got to lower the rates or you put it into an escrow account that does replacement down the road.
yeah,
When you came for anything else, you did it for years, we used the money. And it took me 15 years to get the council to realize they were stealing from us.
and we don't, I don't know what's going, but we don't do that. So that's just not how we, oh,
Nobody. I could hear.
Yeah.
Nobody else. Nobody out there can hear me?
Zoom.
Oh, well.
so I agree with the philosophy. Our objective is that services received should match the cost paid.
Absolutely. We shouldn't pay anything. We had, I was on the sewer board years ago when we did the spray irrigation. We always had 100,000 gallons in reserve. Then that changed over the years for some reason. Now you need 100,000 gallons for new organic stuff. Why should we buy another 100,000 gallons? We had it. And council got greedy and gave it to Kennet Township and New Garden. Now we're going to have to buy it again. My whole family's been buying this sewer since 1923. Since 1923, I paid for it so many times. It's not funny. I don't want to pay 100,000 gallons again. Let Kennet Township and New Garden pay for it.
I think the summary, we're not going to decide the policy tonight, but I think the summary for John's point is that you're not satisfied with the sewer arrangement that we have with Kennet Township.
No.
Fair? Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Excuse me 1 second. Are there any other questions or comments, Rob in the back room? For Kyle, related to the strategy and the priorities, please. We'll have time for general comment afterward as well. Related to the strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Hi, my name's Gina. And I was at one of the planning sessions and believe me, your facilitator was amazing. But I do feel like your outcomes don't have the spirit of the group that I was with. So not going to go into details, but I think that there was definitely some voice missing in some of your outcomes.
Specifically?
I was in the group with the people that live in town. And I just feel like the spirit of our conversation was definitely missing in those outcomes. So.
Okay.
So let's catch up after and we'll try to integrate it. Now this is taking into account, quite a few people, but I don't want anything to feel like it was missed. So we can connect.
Thank you. Any other questions related to this for Kyle?
I just wanted to say that a few people in our neighborhood did not get that survey that you sent out asking the questions.
It was mailed to every address.
There's 3 of us here that did not receive it. And I do open up my mail, believe it or not.
Well, we send out a newsletter twice a year. It's not a survey, it's a newsletter update. And it says in there that every spring we do a planning effort. That was sent to every address. So we can connect after to see if there was an address missed, but I would be surprised.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you sent out a separate survey form
No.
Well, that would have been helpful. No offense.
Mailers are expensive. I mean, we do it in our e-newsletter. We would encourage everyone to sign up for that. But mailed newsletters are expensive and it's a balance.
Okay. Any other questions related to the strategy? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kyle. Next, for those of you that were here in March, we had a session, a workshop on affordable housing. And at that session, the council asked the planning commission to go away as a group and come back to us with recommendations in terms of what advice you have to the council related to accessory dwelling units and whether we should change, excuse me, any of our ordinances as it relates to accessory dwelling units. That's what Andy is here for as the chair of the planning commission. The question, just so everyone is aware, and the council is certainly aware of this, the question the council is being asked to consider tonight is, does the council support asking the planning commission to work with staff and our solicitor to draft a revised accessory dwelling unit ordinance, including some or all of the discussion that we'll have tonight, and bring that back at a future meeting for the council to debate and consider. We're not deciding the ADU ordinance tonight. Even if we wanted to do so, we can't. Legally, that's not the process and how it works. To actually change the ordinance would require a vote by council first on the proposed ordinance, followed by it being sent to Chester County Planning Commission for their review and comment back before it comes back to the council for a final vote and a public hearing that everyone would be invited to as well. So I just want to make sure the only thing we're considering tonight is whether to ask the planning commission to go forward and work with staff to revise the draft to give us a recommendation. I certainly don't want us to waste, excuse me, I certainly don't want to waste the time of the planning commission or the resources of the borough. So we need to get some direction to say, hey, this is something we should go on with, or let's call it quits. We've talked about this for too long. Let's move on to the next issue. So that's the question tonight. Andy, your show.
Thank you. And thanks to council for this opportunity. For the past year or so, the Planning Commission has been discussing and researching means to address the housing concerns within the borough. Tonight, I will discuss one aspect that would increase the housing inventory with a minimal disruption to the character of the town. A little background is, and also why, to discuss the why and how of our recommendations, give you a definition of an ADU, discuss the commission's recommendations, and examine the modifications to the zoning code we suggest. The Planning Commission, or the PC as we like to call it, has been studying the housing situation in Kennett for about a year. Last summer, council agreed with a letter that we sent them that we should define possible modifications to our zoning codes that will assist in the meeting of housing demand. What follows tonight are those suggested modifications with reference to accessory dwelling units. Borough Council has addressed or identified housing as a top priority. The County Commissioner also brought that up tonight. There is no single answer or approach to solving the demand for housing in Kennett. We face the same problem that many communities across the country face, which is more housing demand than housing inventory. The borough and the township have seen building booms in the past. In the 80s, John will remember, we had a lot of building boom for single family homes, mostly in the townships. In the last few years, the building boom has been happening within the borough and around this perimeter, but it's a different type of housing. It's apartment units, condos, townhouses. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs as we like to call them, has the potential to ease some of that and that demand for housing. What is an ADU? Essentially, it's what people might call a granny flat or carriage house. It's a separate living space on a single family home, usually property, that's completely independent of the main residence. In other words, it's a separate structure. It has bath facilities, kitchen facilities, bedroom. It is not attached to a building. The current code does allow for what's called accessory apartments, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Generally, ADUs are built on the alleys to the rear of the main house. In Kennett, these are normally found in the R3 zone. So if you look at Kennett between State and South Street, between Race and Center Street is where most of the ADUs can be found within the borough currently. Accessory apartment definition in the code is a living space that does not necessarily have all the other facilities. It may be shared facilities, as in a shared kitchen or a shared bath facility. Is located normally in the primary residence or the primary structure, and it's governed by a set of rental policy issues. In our area, the ADUs are generally pre-code. In other words, they were built in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th century, before zoning codes were enforced. Generally, in our borough, they were actually carriage houses. The one on my property housed horses and a carriage. It actually is older than my house. But they were built before code, and most of them are 2 stories and are converted in many cases to living spaces. I did a walking tour of the borough, and I found approximately 26 current ADUs in the borough. And the way I defined that was if it had curtains in the window and an air conditioner, it was probably an ADU and not simply a garage. There were another 75 or so structures on alleys that may or may not be convertible. I would guess probably 20 to 25 have a realistic chance of being converted into an ADU. And there were probably in that same area, well over 100 lots that had no such structures on them at all. So there is some space available. Now, the county supports ADUs, as the commissioner just mentioned, for a number of reasons. One is affordability. Most of the affordability doesn't come from construction costs. Construction costs are insane at anything that you're building these days. Well, what you do save on is the land. In other words, if you own a house in Kennett, say it's on a 7,500 square foot lot, you've already paid for that lot. You've already paid for that expenditure for land. So the construction costs are your primary costs. That tends to lower the cost per unit. It is a way of supporting us old folks like John and me, in that you can have a primary house, have an ADU, kids can move in the house and you get moved to the ADU. At least that's what my kids want me to do. We protect open space, not terribly much in Kennett because there isn't that much open space to begin with, but in other areas that's in effect. It is an efficient use of the current infrastructure. If you take a 15-acre lot, like lives over here somewhere, and you build a lot of houses on it, you have a lot of infrastructure costs. Water, bridge, roads, sewer, all those things add up. If you're on a property in town, all those things currently exist. And though you may have a tie-up fee or other construction, it's not the same level of cost. The final thing would be neighborhood character. If you walk down, say, Chestnut Alley or Sycamore or Church Alley or School Alley, where most of the ADUs currently live, you'll find it's a little different atmosphere because you have people living there. You have people living on the alley. So from a security point of view, from a just sort of a environment, it's a nicer environment than an alley that only has garbage cans and parking spaces. I will mention that and I think Commissioner also mentioned, Westchester recently passed an ADU ordinance change. Oxford is considering it. The definition you can read above me, but our particular definition is a detached living unit, either a renovation or an expansion of an existing structure or a new purpose-built structure. Zoning code currently allows for an accessory rental unit, and we talked about that, as part of an existing structure. These would be rental apartments that you find in some of the old Victorian houses in Kennett. What we're talking about is a separate, completely independent living space, separate entry, separate facilities. There are some restrictions in the current code that affect the ability for someone to build an ADU for a non-pre-existing structure. In other words, you have an 1890 carriage house. current code allows you to convert that to living space. What we found in those 75 structures that I found on the alleys in Kennett, a lot of them were garages. And one of the ways of using a garage as an ADU is to add a second story. Current code does not allow that because it limits the height of those structures. So our first issue is changing that. And what we consider to be workable is raising the height limit from 15 feet to 25 feet. This different height, the current height limitation does limit the number of structures that can be converted or constructed. There are also some technical issues. For instance, PECO has a rule that you can't have a house closer to 7 feet to their transmission line. So there are other things going on here. But the height situation is currently the primary reason you can't build. The second issue, as you see above, is parking. Our proposal would modify the current parking regulations, which is 2 parking units for each residence on a property, to 2 for the primary residence, 1 for the ADU, simply to make it a little easier to find the space in a property to accommodate an ADU. And as we all know, the king of monkey wrenches is parking. The commission recognizes that parking is the quintessential conundrum in Kennett. More housing, more people, more cars, more parking, fewer spaces near your house. The commission thinks that this limit to 1 is a good compromise. And we also think that the properties most likely to take advantage of an ADU are already of a size that would permit 3 parking spaces off street. Again, if you look at the borough, say you look at Broad Street or some of Union Street, Marshall, or some of the other streets in Kennett, those are 50 to 75 foot wide lots, 150 feet deep. Those can support an ADU, and they can support the additional parking. If you're looking at, say, the 200 block of Center Street or the 300 block of Union Street, those lots are very narrow, in some cases 15 feet or less. They're probably not going to build an ADU in a 15-foot wide lot. So in that case, the parking issue doesn't come up. We think our estimate is that over the next 7 to 10 years, we would be surprised if we found more than 20 to 25 ADUs built in the borough. You have to realize that in 100 and some years, we've only got 20 some as it is now. So we don't think, because it's still, it's not cheap to build these days, $150 to $200 a square foot, for instance. There are a limited number of unit properties that could hold these. And there's a limit, I don't know what the demand is. So if you look at it, you take 20 units, you add 1 more car, that's 20 cars spread over all most of the center of town. The equivalent in new construction would be 4 plexes or 6 apartment block apartments or condos on perhaps 2 property lots bought together with the houses knocked down to build bigger apartment units. You then have 14 to 24 cars to worry about. This is a simpler, easier way to do it with less stress on our system and less disturbance to the character of the town from our point of view. Building size is one of the other ones. We're suggesting that the building, as you can see, the limit now is 50% of the square footage of the principal residence. Again, technically or tactically, most ADU likely sites are houses that are probably 2,500 to 3,500 square feet anyway. So a 1,000-foot limit is not going to get anywhere close to 50%. If you have a 1,500 square foot house on a very small house lot, you're probably not going to want to build an ADU. So from a practical point of view, 1,000 square feet as a maximum, not as a recommended size, but as a maximum. That's a 20 by 25 square foot building, say on a 50-foot wide lot, 2 stories tall. Not huge, but not necessarily obstructive, if you will. We think ADUs are also sort of a transitional housing ability. You can leave that one, yeah. In that, as I said earlier, ADUs are many times used for young folks who are just getting out of school, perhaps, and just starting new jobs, looking for a comfortable place to live that's not terribly expensive. Could be senior folks who are moving out of their large house and don't want to spend all their equity on a bigger house or a more expensive, smaller house. Could be transitional folks that are in town for a year or two working a job, don't want to invest in a property, but will have some place that is nice to stay in the center of town, be part of the town's activities. We think it's an opportunity to bring additional housing units into Kennet. And I think primarily in a way that doesn't affect how the town looks and feels, which is, to me, as a member of the HARB, the Historic Architecture Review Board, is very, very important. I don't want to disturb what the town is, because that's what makes the town as popular it is with us and with other folks. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions from council or from public.
Thanks, Andy. Why don't you take my seat and Mike's phone? How many other members of the planning commission are there? Or the mic around, it might be a little bit easier than everyone coming up and back and forth. I know some people don't like to do that. So we'll take any and all public questions, comments. I ask you to be polite, professional, civil with respect to everyone else that's here. And please use the microphone so folks at home can hear you that are zooming in. And your comments are limited to 4 minutes or less, please. And Ellie will help us keep the clock on that. Secondly, we certainly welcome any comments or questions from folks on Zoom. Just put your comment or question in the discussion box, the chat box. And Rachel, if you could flag those down if there are any. And then I wanted to kick it off with 2 letters that we received related to ADUs. The first one is from Diana and Kevin Lomas, who says, to Borough Council, I am opposed to the Planning Committee proposal to change the ADU R1 requirements, allowing second-story ADU in the borough. Please do not allow this in our small town. That was one. And then I received a second email. It says, I understand, this is from Sylvia and Patrick Mahan. I understand that the Borough Council is considering the proposal to relax rules that restrict ADUs. Patrick and I won't be able to make the meeting tomorrow night, but we wanted to express our support for the proposal. We believe a more generous policies toward ADUs would help make housing in the borough more affordable and would do so in a way that would retain the neighborhood character. Sincerely, Sylvia and Patrick. So a couple comments and we'll open it up to the floor if you have any
Bob.
questions.
When do you plan to have the council ask questions?
Whenever the council would like to.
Okay.
Would you like to start it off?
Yeah, sure.
Please, go ahead.
So I was looking closely at the current codes. So one of my questions for you was about the setbacks. So as I read it, the current setbacks for accessory buildings are 3 feet. Has the planning commission given some thought to what the setbacks would be for an ADU?
Yeah, the discussions we've had with the code enforcement folks is that we would leave the current setbacks as is.
Okay.
So we would not give preferential treatment to ADUs on setbacks.
Okay, yeah, it just seems to me like in the districts like Stunning Hills where the houses back up to each other and there is no alley, that all of a sudden you'd have a building pretty close to your backyard, what people think is their backyard, so.
Yeah, the changes to the zoning code would be universal. So they would apply to all zones, including R1, R2, R3.
Mhm.
Again, from a practical point of view, trying to put one in that location, because you would probably want to extend the driveway, you need to do a lot of other things. Not as likely to happen as on the center of town lot. I can't guarantee it wouldn't happen, but they would still need to meet all of the current setbacks. And we are in discussion with borough staff on the impervious, non-impervious coverage. Those are details still to be worked out. Any other
Am
council
I
members?
reading it right? Council?
3 feet, yes.
3 feet? Okay, thank you.
Any other council questions or comments at this point? Just flag me down if I miss you and let me know. John, I think you had your hand up first.
Good presentation, Andy. For somebody that has that exactly what you said. Took me 40 years to build it. You cannot see it from the street. You cannot see it from the street. And I kept it that way on purpose. My problem with what you're saying is there's two problems I see. One, people go up 25 feet. It might be higher than their house is, so you can see it. Two, I think before you agree to anything like this, you need to do a traffic survey. Traffic is going to be the biggest, we got traffic problems now. And I think this is only going to be good for the rich people in the north who got big enough lots, and they're not going to rent them cheap. They're going to be $2,000 or more. So all you're doing is making all you're doing is making them richer. If you can't do
To be
it in
hon-
Sunny Hills, then you're not gonna be able to do it.
To be honest, John, I found no ADUs currently there. Not on the alleys, okay? Now, if you're in Hessian Hills maybe, or somewhere up there, there are some. But look, the height restriction in most of the locations is not a huge problem because we already have it. Like I said, walk up Schoolhouse Alley or Church Alley or any of those, you already have buildings of those heights, so they were pre-existing. I don't think adding them more on those alleys is a problem. In Stenning Hills or somewhere else, they might be. In terms of what people might charge for them, we can't control the market. But
Hold on, one at a time, please. One at a time.
no one controls the market because you can't set rental prices. However, if you take people out of one level of housing and put them in another higher, the lower level becomes available. So you are doing increasing the inventory. Because if you're in an apartment, you're paying $1,250 a month, and you go and you can now afford to pay $1,500 or $1,800 a month, that $1,250 may still become available. I don't guarantee that. And again, in terms of traffic, John, we're looking at maybe 20 cars. No, because it depends on how many you build. If you get one extra car or two on a street, at most, you're going to get 40 on 20 units. If you build 6-unit apartment complexes, you got more.
Another question over
Okay.
here. John, excuse me.
It's not a question, it's a comment. My name is Hillary Holland, and I want to start off by saying I support affordable housing, but I don't see how the ADUs will lead to a greater number of units of affordable housing. As Commissioner Maxwell noted, other communities have created these amazing projects, but this 1 square mile borough is not comparable to Westchester or Oxford or Coatesville. And I'm going to reiterate some of John Thomas's points. There is no way the borough can tell people that they have to charge an affordable rent and what rent they have to charge. So how do ADUs add to affordable housing? Secondly, there's nothing to prevent people from turning their brand new ADU into a much more lucrative Airbnb. I was looking at Airbnbs in Kennett, and I was astounded at the number of them. And I actually just looked in Downingtown. There are 2 in the city center. There are several properties on State Street and Union Street that used to be starter homes that are now out of the rental market and are Airbnbs, which I'm sure this is going too far, but Kennett needs an Airbnb policy before it changes its zoning. If Airbnbs are being taxed as residential and there's nobody living there, they should not be taxed as residential. And I realize there are some folks who do live in the property that they use as an Airbnb. There are others who do not. And on that subject, are the Airbnbs inspected as rental properties? Are they licensed, and should they be limited? Adding ADUs is not going to bring affordable housing, because when the people move up, the lower level pricing, will rise.
And none of the presentation said that this was a solution to affordable housing. It's not. We admit that. But we do have to have pricing or housing at all price levels. And there is a demand for it. On your second point, the next challenge for the Planning Commission is looking at all of our rental policies, including short-term rentals, long-term rentals, rental agreements, protection for landlords and for rental renters. So that's on our calendar to do, and that will be coming up for us in June.
Council, nobody can have enforced anybody to charge a specific rent.
No, and that's, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. And I did not mention that in my presentation, did I? Okay. Right. And I agree with you.
Another question over here.
Peter Doring, property owner on Linden Street. So a couple of comments. One is, I think it's important that whenever we have this discussion or any member of the council or the planning commission moves a proposal forward, that they be transparent about where their business interests lie. Do they own property? Do they engage in real estate transactions? It's not to imply that people are doing this nefariously, but still it does affect their interests. So for example, I own 3 properties in the borough and I have had an ADU request denied. I have while in the example given, I do not have an issue with an individual homeowner who may choose to add an ADU. What I'm concerned about are a number of developers who own 20, 30, 40 properties within the borough. And in that case, we have the risk of an explosion of ADUs that for which we have no control over price, et cetera. But to echo an earlier point, I think we have to strike the word affordable from any discussion about ADUs. It is relevant because the original commission given to the Planning Commission referenced the need to have affordable housing. There was an editorial in Chester County Press talking about this as being an affordable housing solution. I have an editorial in today's Chester County Press that counters that. This is not affordable. The market will go, people will pay what the market will ask for. So what I would recommend is that we have a concerted effort to, in parallel to these zoning changes, a serious concerted effort to look at all the options for affordable housing. There's great examples that have been done here in this part of the state and elsewhere in the state. And I would look forward to seeing a serious discussion of affordable housing strategies.
And to answer your first point, I, for one, have lived in the borough for 40 years. I own a house. I did take my carriage house, convert it for an ADU. I wish I was making rental, but a family member lives there and I don't get any rent from her. But but I have no other interest, commercial or otherwise, in any of this that's going on. Secondly, in terms of affordability, there are avenues that we're looking at. We've been looking at affordability, and this is not a problem that is being solved easily anywhere, especially not in Kent, because of the limited geographic area that we have to work with. We have a major development at some point that will come up with the old NVF site. And I know that council and the planning commission are certainly looking at trying to find some affordable units within that development. That's on our radar, but that's in the future. What we're saying here is anytime you increase inventory, you have the ability to move people into housing that's affordable to them or attainable, as the commissioner mentioned. Again, we haven't, even of all of the existing structures that are pre-code were developed, it still wouldn't be more than about 30 more units or 30 units altogether. There just isn't happening. Yes. Westchester has had this available for some period of time, almost a year now. They've had 1 unit done. Thank you.
I only come up here because I can't read my own writing. Down. My name is Mary Rissick, and I'm here as a taxpayer of Kennett Borough. Okay, anybody hear me now? Okay. Some of the things that I had written in here have already been spoken about, but I'm going to repeat them anyway. Where does the words affordable housing come from? That's all we've been saying is affordable housing. Kennett Square is not a metropolitan area. It is very limited in its community and its size. There's a new hotel being built in Westchester. It's a very large hotel. The Hilton Garden Inn is being rebuilt. The Fairfield Inn is here. There are dozens of Airbnbs here in Kennett. Some of them were done under the radar and now operate as a business. Some, and maybe most, are operating as a business and not paying county taxes. A lot of old garages that are being remodeled are now being used as a business and again, not paying county taxes. The borough is overflowed with Airbnbs. The taxes are extremely high in the borough and a lot of people cannot afford them. The senior citizens are strapped and the borough is giving back nothing to them. But yet they want to help those people who are not paying their fair share taxes by operating a separate business and allowing this to happen. This borough is a lovely and a small town America. Progress does not stand still, but as citizens of this borough, we have to learn to control progress to keep our community safe, affordable, and livable, and keep us a small town America for the future. So a family can be raised here, our seniors can stay in their homes, and be able to live out their life here and still be in a safe community. There is a traffic and parking overload in the borough. The borough is small. It's only 1 square mile. The water and sewer systems are just about at the peak. Major apartment complexes have been brought in, and yet nothing is given back to taxpayers. Having more auxiliary buildings or what you think is affordable housing does not make housing affordable. It only puts money in the pocket of the people who are already sidestepping their responsibility to this community, and you can't control any monies that they charge. Kennett Square is a community that cannot control rent. There are 31 states that have laws that preempt or forbid local governments from enacting rent control measures, and that's as of February 2022. Pennsylvania is not a rent-controlled state. Why not make a priority of helping the senior citizens and real taxpayers of this fine community by putting plans in place, money back in the citizens' pockets, instead of money in the pockets of some that don't even live here in this community? Thank you.
I will actually agree with almost everything you just said. Okay, because we recognize, and I think council does too, the planning commission is very concerned about Airbnbs or VBROs or whatever. And we are going to work assiduously to come up with new policies regarding short-term rentals.
Hold on, one at a time, please. Next comment.
But let me just finish this statement, because it is the next thing we will do, and that starts in June. Because that's when, well, actually it'll start in May, because that'll be our next meeting. But it's not a simple process and it won't happen overnight. But it is something we feel that has to be addressed. And we have told council as the planning commission that it needs to be addressed as well. And again, I don't think you found in our presentation tonight or any of the discussions we've had with council, the word affordable. We understand that these are not necessarily affordable, but they will be affordable for someone. Okay?
Comment.
May I?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Millie Papera, 705 South Washington Street. Andy, thank you. And I liked your comments. Anyway, I live at South Washington Street for 42 years. Now, we want to talk about affordable housing. I bought my house with HUD 42 years ago when the interest rates were 16.5%. Anyway, got out of that. I own my home now. But anyway, I'm a little bit concerned about, and all of you that have been down my street know what it's like. We tell our neighbors, look, just don't park in front of my the mailbox until the mailman passes. And we love our neighbors, but kick the pots. I have maybe 15 people next door and I love them all. But if we keep having these houses being, and we have overcrowding, I came here years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, talking about the overcrowding. All I got, thank God for Albert, got me the Watch Children sign because it was crazy down there. But anyway, I'm just worried about the parking and the crowding and the children. They're running out in the street. My husband would get mad at me because I'm sitting out in my driveway watching these kids because I'm saying, stop, don't go. A kid did get hit on my street and thank God he was okay. But we need to be careful about that. Okay, we really do. And the parking and the cars, and there's just so many. There's just so many. And I love my neighborhood and I don't want to leave it.
Thank you. Sir.
Billy, I understand completely. And look, parking has been a problem in the borough for as long as I've been here. And I've been here as long as you have, 70 some years. So it is a question, but it's not a question that's going to be answered by this proposal. All right. What we're trying to do is limit parking in some respects, but this isn't designed to solve the parking problem in Kennett. The parking problems in Kennett, principally in the outlying parts of the borough, are because we have overcrowding in housing.
Next.
No, we're adding people who can live in apartments instead of having 3 unrelated families in a house, maybe only have 2. All right, because we're just adding some places for them to live, John.
Next comment.
My name is Aid Sandwright Riggins. I'm the new interim pastor at First Baptist Church here in Kennett Square. And this community is very new to me, and the challenges and opportunities are new as well. And I certainly see that this is a very complicated and intricate issue. But one of the things that I've just noticed, just even in my short time here at the church, I was interested in this discussion because it talks about accessory dwelling units. And where I see this touching the life of the members of our church really has to do with seniors that can no longer afford to stay in their principal dwelling, and possible opportunity for them to build another unit where they may move into and be able to afford and have their house lived in by someone else. And also seeing that younger people who are just coming out of school and trying to get their acts together are not able to afford some of the other housing stock. So I'm not saying that all of these issues that I'm hearing are not real issues, because they probably are real issues. But at the same time, I think that there's a real opportunity for people who have lived here all their lives to possibly continue to stay here, as well as their children wanting to be able to afford to live in the community that's becoming overpriced for them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think we mentioned that during our presentation. Yes. Say you're a homeowner in Kennett, you've lived in your house for 40 years. You have increased the equity because of the market has changed. However, if you sell that, you're not going to be able to move anywhere close and use that money to buy even a smaller house and have equity left over. So the ability to take your property, add something to it, live there, and still maintain the property in your name and that equity is a viable way of looking at things. The same for young folks. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to follow along my colleague. My name's Ken Buck. I'm the transitional pastor at Kennett Presbyterian, just down the road on South Broad Street. And again, how it affects our parishioners when we have our teenagers heading into young adulthood or our college students coming back. It is wonderful to think about the idea of having the various sizes and qualities and increased inventory for them to be able to come back to their community that they have grown up in and have felt a kinship and a real tie to. My wife is a school teacher in another district, and sometimes her students laughingly say, "Oh, I can't wait to get out of town." And she laughs, "Oh, that's so cute," because you can't stick around.
Right.
And so that's one of the things we don't want to be true for our parishioners and for our community members. And so I stand in favor of this proposal. Not that it solves everything, and of course there's other things to be dealt with, but just the idea of, my basic economics I learned in 12th grade told me that if there's more inventory, property prices tend to drop. If there's less inventory, prices tend to go up. And I know that's a little simplistic, but That's what I'm kind of hoping would happen, but also just the sheer volume of inventory in town would probably help some people. So I stand in favor.
Thank you. Second. One. That's all right. Go ahead. Juan.
It seems that ADUs are a very big problem because people at the end of the day are going to abuse of these ADUs and going to charge a lot of money. And I have had people, young people, come up to me who said they want to keep living here, but they can't afford it. They can't. It's the truth. They can't afford it. And ADUs, unfortunately, even it may be a good idea or not, but people are going to abuse of it. They're going to make it expensive and they're going to make it unaffordable. And I've had people come up to me who have literally said, "Can it's become for the rich people only?" I think any new policies that come from this borough council should be focused on affordable housing and how to have people come back to the borough and afford to live here, because it's not happening. It's getting ridiculously expensive to live here, and ADUs unfortunately is just going to make it worse. Prices are going to go off the roof. People are going to abuse of ADUs and going to charge heck a lot of money. I think we should focus on any new policy that should come out of this borough that has affordability in mind first. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrew Cormier. I live in the borough for about 13 years now. I don't think that the allowing ADUs is in the borough's best interest.
May I ask why?
I'm going to elaborate, absolutely. Happy to do so. The predominant reason we have right now, and the way you presented it, Andy, was that these are for altruistic reasons. This is for an elderly person. This is for a family. There is a hardship test right now that enables people to do this, to build their ADUs, and that is working. This is happening in the borough on a limited basis. There's no need to expand this and open up Pandora's box, so to speak. This would allow essentially anyone in the borough to create an ADU. It would allow them to become a landlord. There's no cure, unfortunately, with this policy for affordable rent. It's likely to lower and it's likely to raise the bar at the lowest rental, unfortunately. We do have a new apartment complex that's coming into the borough. There's 166 units. It's 160 square feet of rental space. Assuming double occupancy, this is 332 new people in the borough. This represents 5.5% increase in population. Our population right now is about 6,000. We're adding 332 people. This is going to be a significant tax on our existing resources. We don't even know what that is. Hearing what you said, there's a possibility that this could apply to R1, R2, R3, all these zoning areas. We could have an absolute influx of ADUs exploding our population, causing damages to resources. There's a significant tax on roads. They're going to wear a lot more. Parking is an issue. It was mentioned in the planning committee meeting for the residents, and it wasn't really mentioned in your summary, Kyle. It was a big, significant issue that was discussed. This would add to that problem that residents are having. This seems to be a stakeholder position and not a resident position. For that reason, I'm entirely against it. I think, and I echo your concerns, we do need affordable housing. We have friends that are dealing with a fire in the township right now. We're trying to help them find housing in this area. It is a huge concern. That should be our focus. Let's focus on the real challenge of the community, not making the richer richer. So thank you for my time.
Thanks.
Bob? May I just address his points? Yes, you're correct. There's a huge crunch. Things are not as affordable as they once were. They're getting more unaffordable in some respects. However, I have to take issue with any statement that says increasing inventory raises prices. It may not modify them a lot or lower them, but it's not going to encourage higher pricing. The council's primary mission here should be addressing the question of short-term rentals, the VBROs and other, whatever that acronym is, my apologies. That is an issue and we should address that. And we will address that from the planning commission point of view and giving them some reasonable alternatives to it. What we're trying to do is look at housing in a multifaceted manner. In other words, what can we do to increase the inventory? What can we do to provide for more choices for more people? This is one very small step that will have probably very few takers, to be honest, because if it had been an issue for the last 30 years, we would have had the pressure to change it 30 years ago, right? Because we haven't. And like I said, we only have a few dozen in the borough currently. And I know my friend Claire will have an argument about that, but we can discuss that. But let's look at it in a holistic manner. If we do this, we can add some inventory. It won't be a lot, all right, but it will be some. And then let's take a look at how we can take advantage of what's coming down the road. My preference would be I'd rather add 20 living units scattered all over the borough than I would 20 units by knocking down current homes and building condos on what used to be single-family houses. But that's my preference. Thank you.
Comment?
Oh, I was just gonna say, you said that it wouldn't raise rent, and we did do our research, and we'll just send those articles in through email on that it would possibly raise
The bar for low.
the bar for the lowest rentals. And just since I have the mic, it's a hot mic, right? I would just like to say that where we live currently, we live really close to where it has had a significant increase of people moving into the area and renting. And it's definitely changed our style and our way of living. At night, there's a lot of people. There's people smoking marijuana right outside my house. And I have children that are up in their bedrooms sleeping. It's loud. They can't sleep. People have their music blaring in their cars right outside our house. So it will have an impact on our way of living. And I think that we are a town that welcomes visitors in, and we are a town that loves to engage in celebrations, and we are open to that, but we also need some time to rest. So I just want the borough to consider our livelihood, those who live here, those who have bought, as you're making your decisions.
None of us imagined that the word affordable was in this, Andy, or we wouldn't be here. You people put that word out, that sent up the red flag, make no mistake.
I did not.
Well, it was there, okay? And anybody who can put the word affordable in the same sentence as ADU doesn't know what they're talking about. Those two things are no way related in Kennett Square. I would say you'd be better off to table this issue until you've done that study on the Airbnbs. Understand what the real dynamic in Kennett Square is right now before you make any changes to the existing ADU code. And if there's any way to understand how many situations you actually have a family member in that dwelling, that would be an interesting thing to see, because I don't think that's what we're seeing today. If there are people who have so much property that they need to put more granny pods all over the place for rental units, we had a zoning specialist do a wonderful presentation a year or so ago. We're already at a precarious rental ratio here. We don't need to put 4 more rental properties on every nice big property in Kennett Square. That's not to our, that, as she just said, that creates a whole different environment than what we want in this town. I do also think it's important that everybody keep in mind when they're talking about changing residential density, that there are fair housing laws that will affect your decisions. And that because we're a USDA area, since mushrooms are our primary industry, you also have no leverage with which to mandate density. So that no matter what the size of that building on the property is, you can put 20 people in it because the United States Department of Agriculture is protecting people in this vicinity, whether they're a real farm worker or not. I think that when we have, what Juan says is absolutely true. We're working on building a much more expensive town. And we went through all kinds of situations in 2008 with bubbles and booms. And one of the things that Mr. Greenspan failed to take into consideration when Congress was grilling him about how did this happen is a little bit like what you just alluded to a few minutes ago. He said, the only real flaw in my logic was I really never believed an American would pay more for something than it's worth. And I wanted to say to him, go look at your wife's shoes. And you can change that opinion really quickly. If folks have more properties than they want, they can divide it, sell it, and build two little homes that regular people can afford if they're so worried about what to do with these big yards they have. I think the way it increases, the way the inventory increases the rent, which is not what my time is up.
You have 1 minute.
Which is what you didn't expect, is that once they're getting 2,000 a month for their 800 square foot place, nobody else is willing to get to less than 2,000 a month for their square foot place. So it does push the rents up, Andy. That's just the reality. Thank you.
Just for clarity, the process of getting this passed and through is probably a 6 to 8 month target before you could even pass it. That gives us opportunity to work on the very issues that you've mentioned in terms of controlling the short-term rental market. That we can control, and that we want to control because there's health and safety issues, there are tax issues involved, and we want to regulate that business as much as can. I'm speaking as a member of the Planning Commission, obviously not a council member. But from our point of view, that's our target, is how do we get that to a sustainable level? Because folks are right, there are a lot of people making money off of short-term rentals that aren't paying taxes and aren't getting inspected, that aren't doing all the things that regular landlords have to do. The other thing we want to do is make sure that both renters and landlords have written leases that are protective of both sections' rights, so that you can't get tossed out just because they painted your apartment a different color. So we're working on that. But again, none of this comes quickly.
Just a few more comments, questions, if that's okay.
Thanks so much. My name's Megan Sullivan and I live on East Linden Street. And I've been there for 7 years. And I think one of the things that I found concerning about the presentation is that in multiple points of the conversation and presentation, and I guess I should start out with that I'm opposed to this, is that I heard that, well, the smaller properties and the properties with the narrower backyards, they won't want to do this. And Stunning Hills won't want to do this because their property is smaller. Well, I live on East Linden Street with a 16-foot wide backyard. And it just seems like it's making it, it would make it available for properties that are already worth more to become worth more, as opposed to allowing, I don't know what it would allow, but it seems like it's not the fairest. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And the second point that I had is the future projection of not thinking that many people would take us up on this. I have been at more meetings than I thought I ever would be to stand up for the preservation of my neighborhood, because people have been asking for variances to the current rules. And I think it's really unfortunate because it's pitting neighbors against neighbors instead of ensuring that our rules and regulations are shored up and seem to be fair across the board. It's making it so that we're coming in and opposing our neighbors who we actually really adore and care for. So those are the 2 points that I wanted to make, and I was hoping that I could afford Peter my remaining time. Who's a neighbor?
Again, your concerns are valid. And what we're trying to do is walk a fine line between increasing inventory and maintaining the character of the town as best as possible. And I'd rather do it this way than many of the other ways that have been put forward, which would be much higher density much more imposure on infrastructure in other areas. This is, for me, and I'm also on the Historic Architecture Review Board, so it's my very deep interest in protecting the architectural integrity of the town as well. So we're trying to do this in the least disruptive manner possible.
My name's Mary Kay Gaber, and I'm here in my capacity as the chair of the Southern Chester County Housing Affordability or Council for Housing Affordability. And that group, we've tried to make sure it's townships from Oxford to East Marlboro and Kennett Township, because we recognize that one borough shouldn't have to solve a problem that everybody's trying to work on. And one of the things we found is that for solving affordable and attainable housing, there just aren't a lot of tools in the toolkit. One, because we have this Commonwealth municipal system that makes everything very difficult. And not a lot is happening at the statewide level because of the lack of action there. So we see this as one tool, an imperfect one, that could increase housing inventory. We completely agree, by the way, on the Airbnb and the VRBO and making sure that that is not how this could be used. I think it's important to note that this is really just discussing whether this is a conversation that should continue. It's not proposing anything. And I think a lot of really valid points have been made here. But I want to make the point that one of the stakeholders that supported this is a group that's trying to figure out how to build more tools so we can build more affordable and attainable housing in our area, because it is needed. And so I want to introduce Bert Rothenberger, who's somebody who's been working on these issues for 40 years at least, Bert, in a lot of different capacities, and just get his insights on that. So Bob, do you mind if I hand it off to Bert? Okay,
And then
all right.
a couple other folks had their hand up.
Thank you. You did very well. Thank you. I don't have raised what I usually raise up there. I'm proud of you. It's one, sorry, I don't know how to rate this. It's one of the first times that I heard the public put the hammer down. And I want to say, because you're all over the place, but you're great, and so I'm going to be all over the place because I've come prepared to respond to what you said. And I think only citizens should be speaking here today. Okay, that's first. We're only 1 square mile. I don't, here's the other thing. I don't like the idea that you're trying to convince us, because you're here to listen to us. So the council should be asking us questions to, so they can get more direction for what their vote's going to be or what their impression's going to be. We don't need anybody selling us something. And that's what it sounds like here today. Number one, when you talk about this 1 square mile, you have to talk about income and price points when it comes to housing, and that's all you should be talking about. When you see affordable, let's just throw that out the window. You got to talk about somebody's annual salary, how many kids they have, what type of dwelling they need, and do you have that variety of houses here in your R1, 2, 3, and 4? Some of the things you said here, Andy, I don't agree with, and I know they're not correct. Number one, the ADUs. They're not only separate accessory dwellings, but they can be attached to the main dwelling, and that's the first purpose many municipalities and cities like Pittsburgh and Harrisburg are using. That if you can attach it, then you don't need to make it separate. And you can also have separate entrances on attached buildings. Some of these people like Kennett South, that's Millie's neighborhood, and Standing Hills can't have them because you don't have an egress. You don't have a road, you don't have an alley, and that restricts the police and the EMS. Now let's think about it. You want to talk turkey? We got the facts. I studied it over a year ago when these people took office. When the realtors and developers started to take over this council, I geared up. And you better look at some other cities, because guess what? You have to have a purpose for doing it in some cities. If you don't have a need, it don't fly. And also the fact is, when your need is no longer necessary, it's closed down. And then I got a lot to say, but I can't say it because you only got 4 minutes. And the thing is, taxes, all these things you people are talking about, but these Airbnbs and all these rentals, and any way you want to call it, that's what it's trying to come in under. I drove around, wrote the addresses down, going to go over to the tax office. Because I don't care if a person's living in it or not, it is an additional structure and you have to pay. And that's what the county wanted to know. Are you sure, Mrs. Watson, do you have the addresses? I said, I'm going to get them, and I got them. And if they don't have a separate house number on them and everything, they should be on that parcel, and it increases the value, and they have to pay more. How do I know that? Mrs. Watson just attached an addition to her house, and the county man was right in my yard, assessing it. I know a lot about over that county, and I don't need anybody to come from there to tell us. We don't need the county to dictate here. You have the right to run the law. And I just think that's all I have with the taxes. And you need to shut down them Airbnbs. They should not be retroactive to any new laws, and they should be cease and desist.
Bert, did you want to say something? Last three comments, is that all right? 1, 2, 3. Bert?
I'm Bert Rothenberger, and I work with the Chester County Council on Southern Chester County Council on Housing Affordability. I'm also on the governance board of the Chester County Partnership to End Homelessness and on the board of Family Promise of Southern Chester County. I also spent 14 years on the board of Habitat for Humanity of Chester County, and I serve on the Chester County Planning Commission's Affordable Housing Committee called Housing Choices. So I get it. I understand why what happens when housing is not affordable, and I also understand how hard it is to develop affordable housing in today's environment. What the Planning Commission is proposing here is a baby step. It's a first step, but it's a first step that many, many other states and municipalities have already taken many years ago. And there is a ton of best practices out there that find ways to address some of the issues that have been raised today. And I urge the Planning Commission to take advantage of those issues, of those best practices. I will mention one statistic which has come up, one of the issues that's come up here. One of the organizations, one of the areas of our country that has been working with ADUs and making them more accessible, to use the right word, is, and they've been doing it for 8 to 10 years. In that period of time, 8 years, 2/3 of the ADUs were rented to households that made less than 80% of the area median income. Yes, indeed, they did make a difference. And we have best practices. We have information from other organizations that we can draw on and deal with. It was already mentioned that Westchester put in a modified ADU ordinance last year. They've only had one application so far, so we're not opening the floodgates. I'll close by simply saying that we know this does work. So let's find a way of working together to do it in a way that does make it work for us. But more importantly, let's show that we are the leaders and put this in place so that the other municipalities surrounding us can also take advantage of it as well.
Two more comments.
Andy, I want to thank you and the committee for all your hard work. However, I am against ADUs. Number one, if you're talking about granny suites or couples, believe me, if I've lived in this borough for 46 years, lived in the township, and my husband's lived here his whole life. If my son and his girlfriend moved into our house and we put an addition on our house, we have a big lot from the garage. My neighbors wouldn't like it if it was 25 feet and approved. Parking would still be an issue. Most couples have at least 2 cars. Most families, husband and wife, have 2 cars today. And if you look at the school parking lots, a lot of students have cars. Parking is a big issue. Infrastructure is terrible. I love the character of this town. I liked it better before we had that new apartment complex near Rite Aid, which has nothing to do with the council that's up there now. I just want to clarify that. But I do think that ADUs will open up a whole can of worms. I am opposed to zoning changes, and I just don't think that is the answer. And the other thing is, I respect everybody that's talked about affordable housing, which we're not talking about. But as Charlotte said, we are the taxpayers, and we should have the voice. And I understand maybe we can work with Kennett Township or other townships for the other issues.
Hi, my name is Tom Souson. I'm the current board president for Family Promise of Southern Chester County, 501c3 nonprofit organization located here in Kennett Square. Our mission is to help families with children experiencing homelessness achieve sustainable housing and stability. Recently, the Director of Human Resources for the Kennett Consolidated School District reported that approximately 250 students in the school district are homeless. This includes not only children who do not have a dwelling to live in, but those who have been left at hospitals, are living in cars, or are living in abandoned buildings. Family Promise works to help families in 3 distinct and at times overlapping focused program areas. First, we work with families who are on the verge of becoming homeless. Possibly these families can't make the next rent payment, or they've been notified they'll be evicted from their current living arrangement. Our social workers and case managers work with these families to develop a customized plan designed to help avoid impending homelessness and address underlying problems that will cause issues for these families in the future. Second program area is our Promise House program. We currently rent 6 apartments, 5 of which are in the borough. When we identify a family that is already homeless, we house them in one of our Promise houses for a period of 90 to 120 days free of charge. During this time, the family engages in intensive case management designed to address the initial problems that cause the family to become homeless. And then we help the family find permanent housing. And that's why Family Promise is in support of the relaxation of the ADU rules. We'd like to see as much inventory in the borough as possible. We work with families for up to a year following the identification of stable housing to ensure success in the long term. As you might imagine, the families we support do not have significant savings. They typically earn a moderate income. These families cannot afford new luxury or high-priced apartments. ADUs offer a possibly more affordable option for families, which make the difference between long-term success or a return to homelessness and a kind of a continuing cycle of despair. Increasing housing, whether it's more affordable or not, in the borough will help many, not the least of which are those that need this help the most. Additional ADUs will increase the supply and again, hopefully make it more affordable for families that are struggling and make the borough a better place for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Just a couple of thoughts. Folks, from the Planning Commission's point of view, we have no authority. We're simply a recommendation body. So we're making recommendations to Borough Council. They're the ones who act. And as taxpayers, you obviously have the ability to vote them in or out of office. But what we were trying to do in this is take, as the gentleman mentioned, a baby step, and this is one way of doing it. I will say from personal experience, I have an ADU on my property. I paid a substantial amount of money to have it renovated. I also got reassessed under the tax level, so I'm paying higher taxes based on it. All right, Charlotte, and I didn't get away for free on it, all right? But it didn't change my neighborhood because I kept it looking exactly the way it looked before I renovated. All right, and I think if you simply walk down some of the alleys in the R3 zone, take a look at what people have done to the ADUs. They don't detract from the borough. They don't detract aesthetically from the neighborhoods. And I think as maybe the chief would hopefully substantiate this, having people living on the alleys makes them a safer place for the most part. What we were trying to do is make a recommendation to council. It's their decision, not planning commission's, to say, this is one way of attacking the housing problems in Kennett. We know it's not a solution to everything. Believe me, we are working just as hard at finding other ways. But again, for instance, the planning commission has the limited authority. We don't get to make the rules, we get to make suggestions. So what I'd like to do, and we'll work with anybody in the county, I don't know if the commissioner's still here or not, but anyone who has suggestions on how we solve the housing problems, we're more than willing to listen to them. Our meetings are the third Tuesdays of the month at 5:30 p.m. in this building. Anybody is welcome to attend any of our planning commission meetings. We will give you a chance to voice your questions and your responses and your suggestions. It is a public process. We encourage you to come. We'd be glad to talk to you in person. I'm available. If you want to get a hold of me, stop me after the meeting. I'll give you my card. Please come and give me a call, send me an email, whatever you'd like. I'd be happy to talk with you. Because what we're trying to do is make things better for the community the best way we know how. And if you have better ways of doing it, we're more than happy to listen to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
and I'm glad we've been able to listen to you.
Thanks. All right, we were hired, they pay us big money to do this up here. It's time to make a decision.
Taking comment?
Yeah. Matt, please.
I look at this as a couple of different things. One is we asked the planning commission a year ago to have these conversations in public at the planning commission meeting and to bring back recommendations to council. And I would like to see a framework of an ordinance so that we can have a real debate on what it really says. I would like to see I'd like to see the time and the process come to a completion. See a sample ordinance come to council so we can have a debate on it, so we could add other conditions to it. If there are things that came up tonight and that will come up over the next several months while it's debated at the planning commission meeting, there are additional restrictions that could be placed. There are things that could be done, but until we have the framework of an ordinance to debate, I don't think we've done our job. Having the conversation we asked them and they spent 10 months on this to not get to a framework of an ordinance to have a conversation around and a debate and a vote on, I think is doing a disservice to the planning commission and to people that have comments. There are a lot of comments that were made tonight that can go into a framework of an ordinance that could address things. You could restrict ADUs to family members. You could restrict ADUs to there's a lot of ways to restrict the way you can. John, I listened to your comments. You can listen to mine on there. Yeah, I don't have the 4-minute rule. You're free to leave. I'm not. So I'll finish my comments. And I get to vote on ordinances. I am the one who finally decides and signs an ordinance into law or vetoes it.
Ms. Watson,
So,
please.
I will continue my comments. And if you don't like them, you can leave. So that's my first comment is I think we should go to an ordinance so that we have a framework to work with. That's what the process was started for. Secondly, I don't think anything is an either or. When council asked for this to happen for planning commission to discuss it was never in the framework of affordable housing. It was in the framework of accessory dwelling units. That's how this process was started when it was started. Other folks, and apparently the state believes that this can make an impact on affordable housing, or the state wouldn't be taking this up at the state legislative level. The state could very clearly come down and may come down with accessory dwelling unit ordinances that we won't be able to supersede. I would like us to continue the conversation on it. But in either or, I do believe we absolutely need to tackle short-term rentals and look at that, but it's not an either or. Getting to an ordinance to debate here, we probably won't see it if we're lucky until late fall if we get it into this calendar year, maybe on there. At the same time, we can be working on short-term rentals. At the same time, other organizations are working on affordable housing and those types of things. We don't have the ability to legislate rentals. We don't have rent control. We don't have any of those things, any of those tools. So I think it's important for us to continue to do our job, that we have a framework of an ordinance that we can debate, that we look at, take the feedback that was provided this evening and from other people who don't come to the meetings, and look at how we can take that and debate a real ordinance with new restrictions and new ideas. Thanks.
It's not a discussion right now. A comment from any other council person? Joe?
Sure, let's give it a shot. First, on the point of affordability, one of the things that I know I've said in the past is that there's, as far as I know, and I've been wrong before, but one of the best ways to ensure that prices and rent go down in a municipality is if no one wants to live there. And I don't want that to happen here. So I'm going to do things that will keep that from happening. So I can't say that I can do anything to actively drop rental prices. And I don't think that ADUs are something directly to do that, or at least I haven't been convinced of that yet. And then on ADUs, I think that one example that was given was for an ADU, there would be parking issues. As it is right now, say maybe 2 off-street parking spaces required to build an ADU. If that property doesn't have room for that, guess what? They can't build an ADU. So the problem's solved right there. And those are the kinds of things that we would be able to put into an ordinance to control when, where, how, why ADUs can be built. So I do agree with Matt that there's value in getting a draft done to see how we can control the implementation of ADUs to keep them in that 10 to 40 count range and not create some of the fears that I heard, which I did hear, of massively blowing up the traffic in the borough and things like that, which I, on a personal level, think are a little overblown, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to listen and to implement what I'm hearing.
Thank you. Any other council input or comment?
You gonna go, Julie? I would just add that I support what Matt suggested, that we actually look at requirements. I was somewhat disappointed with the proposal because it seems to not address things that seem important to me, like the setbacks, which is why I asked that question early on. The setbacks in Stenning Hills just doesn't seem like enough to me. So I fully support putting a full ordinance together, but we need to actually dig into these issues and come up with a set of rules that would be sensible.
I also agree. It feels like we don't have enough. There should be more restrictions.
Andy, I'm going to interrupt you just out of courtesy to everyone else and ask the council to comment at this point. I'm sorry.
I think for me, this is just something that I need, I think, more information on. I think everybody has brought up a lot of great points about obviously short-term rentals and what those look like here. I think parking probably does need to be looked at a little more closely before we make any decisions on anything. You know, I'm open to keeping the conversation going, but I think we need to be really honest with ourselves about what we can and handle here. And I think too, you know, definitely having, I don't know if this is information I can get, but just, you know, information on who we have in our, you know, ADUs now and what that looks like and who we are helping and all of that, I think would just help make future decisions a little bit better. Just after hearing a lot of comments and some of the concerns, I think it would just help to understand that demographic a little bit better.
I live on East Linden too, so I don't think I'll be building this in my backyard. I can have a hard time finding parking. I hear what you said. I come from a degree with interior design and I like the look of our town. I've traveled to South Carolina, Charleston, Savannah, And I personally like going down the little alleys and seeing what people have done there. I thought it'd be a great area for us to implement here in Kennett. But I hear what you have to say. I respect that, and I think we should look more into this. I was at the meeting I'm on the committee for development, and I was at the meeting when they were talking about this. And I asked the question, with all the variants and all the ordinance that we have in place, how many could be placed? How many of these homes could be done? I think you told me around 20 to 25 as a max. So I don't know if it'll have a big impact on our town. But I think we need to look deeper into this because I've definitely heard what you had to say. I was for it. But I'm here for representing you all in my town, so I respect that. So let's learn more about it.
We're happy to work with our planning commission as a staff, and we got some really good feedback here tonight, so we can work to try to merge those two things together.
Thank you. But Andy, in fairness to everyone else, I'm not allowing them to speak. So I appreciate, I know you're the chair of the planning commission, but I've asked everyone else to not as well. So I hope you understand. And just briefly from my perspective, for what it's worth, we actually, when we first moved here, we had an ADU in the back of our house, and I didn't realize the value of it. I used it as an office for a while. And then one of our children wanted to move back into the area and frankly couldn't afford to. And we were very fortunate. We had this ADU, and she lived in that ADU for a couple of years. She's a preschool teacher, so you can imagine the salary. And it allowed her to come back to Kennett. We didn't want her in the house, for crying out loud, but at least it allowed her to come back to Kennett. And she was able to, we charged her a low rent, and she was able to save money to buy a house in Kennett. So from a personal experience, it's, that's an N of one. I do think it's a supply demand thing, and we're not going to go crazy to say it's going to make Kennett affordable. If you live in Kennett, it's a 1 square mile town. Everything is on our backyard. It's, anything we do affects our neighbors in one way or another. You can't hide from it because it's so small. We said as a council prior to Ellie and Julie coming on, we said that we were looking for affordability. We wanted to support and help Kennett become more affordable. And I don't think this ADU thing is going to change us to be affordable, but it is a small step of supply and demand along that curve. We said, no, we don't, as we shared on Monday, we don't want to sell any borough land or use any borough land for affordable housing, at least not right now. So our bag of tricks is pretty low. My concern is at least this gives us one step in that direction, and what we have on the table tonight is far from perfect. I think you hear a lot of changes that actually have to happen. But we are running out of tools, and if we think we should force affordable housing on developers, and we all know the one property in the borough that has any real impact in terms of density or potential affordability, there's one piece of land that could help with affordability. And I think it's somewhat hypocritical if we say you carry the entire burden and us who have some tools aren't willing to use any of those tools whatsoever. I just think it's part of the trade-off. I do support the Planning Commission coming with a draft. I think Lexi, from comments that I've seen, had some very good suggestions that we should consider in terms of how to temper that and how to make that a baby step and not a giant step. Nonetheless, I think it's a step in the right direction, but I would tie it with regulations on short-term Airbnb style residences or buildings as well. So with that, council, the question, I'll repeat it. Does the council support asking the Planning Commission to work with staff and our solicitor to draft a revised accessory dwelling unit ordinance, including some or all of what we discussed tonight, and bring that back at a future time for council consideration? I'll just run down the table. Julie, that's a yes.
Yes.
Joel, that was a yes. Timothy, yes. Samothy? Mr. Mayor, you want to express an opinion? That's a yes. It's unanimous in terms of asking the planning commission to move forward. I appreciate desperately, I know how passionate this topic is on both sides. And I appreciate the politeness of the group and the questions and responses very, very much. I know it's not easy with something that's so passionate. With that, final is any public comment not related to ADUs or anything else we've discussed tonight. Would anyone like to make a comment? This is public comment not related to ADUs or anything else. I'll grab you the speaker so folks at home can hear. Well, folks can.
We're really concentrating on things that I think you're putting the cart before the horse. Number one, Santander Bank is out of business. Land Hope is gone. Rite Aid is gone. The two buildings uptown at Genesis aren't earning us anything. And we're talking about some frivolous luxury for a wealthy person. Because no poor people are building an ADU in their backyard. And I want all them people who need housing at Family Promise, go over Westchester and get them too, from the Salvation Army and everywhere, and take them right up to the north part of our town. So they can be in those Airbnbs and in those accessory dwelling units. So we can take care of affordable housing. Take them up there. The other thing is, we're over $21 million in debt, and I ain't gonna let that go. And I can safely say 31 million because I haven't added in the debt of the two garages, nor the engineers, nor the lawyers, nor the architects. And we're sitting here talking about something for a wealthy person. I think council better get their priorities right. And what you call strategic planning is not strategic planning at all. Strategic planning is when you select a citizen group, also key members of your society, whether they're in the borough or not, from all religious organizations, every civic organization. And then we have an audience. We have surveys. We have, I think it was Department of Community Affairs comes down and helps us. And we all get together and we all hear the result that they have collected on the data, not you. Not you. And I still have my booklet at home at the last one I participated in when they had the luncheon and it was presented, and it wasn't in the last 20 years or 30. So you better know what government is here, because we're not seeing government being run as our government is run, with the Roberts rules, with the zoning board doing what it needs to do, and you not surpassing it or rendering it null and void. Get with the program. If I ever get a course in the case in the county court, I know we can put you down.
Yes, please.
For one, I'm very disappointed that you voted for that. You always want to know what the public says. You heard it tonight. You heard it today. And you represent us. It's not your individual desires. You represent, and the people spoke. I'm so tired of people saying, oh, this is what the people want. They want a bike trail. You talk to 4 people with bikes and you say, the people want a bike trail. Tonight, you had people up here talking for what, an hour? They didn't want these because they're all for rich, and you just ignored them. You just went ahead and did what you're going to do anyway. I got a couple questions. I've been gone for 5 months. So I want to know, did we get the $1 million for this building yet? The Genesis is holding?
Oh, it's in an escrow fund that we use for repairs.
What the
Yeah.
hell? That's been 2 years.
We
How long are we going to do it?
If you could just keep it civil, please, John.
We control the
civil.
escrow fund.
Well, fix the building. It's poor fixing the building. It's designated. Get the building fixed. Don't sit there 2 years later and say, well, we control it. Hell, it's not doing you any good in the bank. Did we sell, Marshall Street? Is it sold, settled? Do we have the cash? 'Cause I don't see anything going on up there,
Yes.
but we have the cash.
Yes.
Okay. Taxes. This council lied to us last year. I supported the fire company tax. Only because if you go back and look at the records, the minutes, you promised me that you weren't gonna raise any other tax. That was going to be the tax for the year. And I figured, well, they're not gonna ask for any more money because they're going to get this every year. And from what I understand, you raise taxes. Besides that. That's why we're so far in debt. Don't tell me why. You just said, if you look at the minutes, you said, if you support this library tax, we're not gonna have to raise, because you raised taxes pretty good the year before. Sewer. Did we ever get a settlement for Kennet Township? For before?
Do you want answers or do you, I mean, I'm genuinely asking, like, I don't want to get into a back and forth.
I don't
can
want to
answer
go back for it. I
after.
always say,
I
did
just-
you get it? Just say yes or no.
A settlement on what?
All that stuff I brought up a couple of years ago where they owed us money for, they owed us about, I said 5 million because Rusty had it wrong, but it turned out to be at least 800,000. But before, they didn't pay. No, you didn't get nothing, but we're gonna give them more to sewer. Now, you talk about moving the specs. I've been here long enough that I remember when I was a kid that they didn't have a fence around here. My dad worked here. And he used to run through everybody took shortcut, bicycles, motorcycles, people. And the cars broke into it. The best thing you could do is paint that fence gold or something. Change it, but don't take that fence down. How can you rent that parking lot for a weekend if you don't have a fence there? People be running over the thing. Why would you ever think about taking that fence down? It protects your property. And you said that last meeting, you're gonna talk about taking that fence down. Stupid. And I'm sorry I'm being rude, but it's stupid. Let me see what else I got here.
John, that's 4 minutes. Any other comments? Thank you. We've got an official clock keeper here. She's an expert in keeping clock. Any other public comments? Any comments from the mayor? Mr. Manager?
I have to just clarify, we were transparent through the whole budget process. So what we said in those meetings was exactly what we did. So it just, I mean, we can catch up after, we can talk about it, but
Go back and look at the
We-
minutes.
I made the presentation. It's what we said it was.
It's not a discussion back and forth. Kyle, anything else?
No.
Thank you. Any council member? Again, thanks for the discussion for both sides and the civility of what was going on. Sam, sorry. Excuse me, Sam?
Sorry. Just have a quick announcement that I wanted to make. The library is hosting a community volunteer fair. So if anybody wanted to get involved, there are a lot of different organizations that are going to be there. They're going to have tables. So if there is anybody who would like to get involved in various community partners, they'll be doing that on Saturday. I believe it's 10 to 2. And so I think the library sent out with their newsletter a list of organizations that will be participating. Nope, we'll be there. So, if you're interested, please check that out. That is all for me.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll shoot you an email when I get that info. Yeah.
For beef.
Yeah, you're right.
Just
You're
let
right.
it be, but you don't want to
Then
be
they
the one.
know. Yeah.
Oh, it's fine.
I have an additional.